When USAirways filed for bankruptcy for the second time this September, you couldn't blame a lot of people in the Piedmont if they ask, what have you done with our gem of an airline?
Well, a half-century ago, a man named Tom Davis had a dream. That dream became the pride of the Piedmont and is the subject of tonight's Buckley Report.
Yeah, this area was filled with entrepreneurs, guys like Tom Davis in the first half of the 20th century. They were men of vision, entrepreneurs who created or expanded companies like R.J. Reynolds, Cone Mills, and Vicks Chemicals. But because of that magical hold that flight seems to have on us, none of those companies captured our imagination or pride like Piedmont Airlines. Somewhere hidden in the sound and light of these old reels,
today, over 500 Piedmont flights take off every day.
Is the story of an institution.
No wonder they call us the up-and-coming airline.
It's not too much of a stretch to say it was a beloved airline in the state because it served the people at a time when no one else was flying in North Carolina.
Piedmont Airlines wasn't so much a company as it was a way of life.
This is their original headquarters. They worked out of a tar paper shack that had been a barracks in World War II at Smith Reynolds.
Piedmont was the dream of Tom Davis, who bought a company called Camel City Flying Service in his hometown of Winston-Salem, and by February of 1948 saw his dream take flight.
In 1948, Piedmont Flight Number 1 took off from Wilmington, North Carolina with the first air connections to Cincinnati, Ohio.
That flight made 6 stops along its more than 5-hour trip. This wasn't just the birth of a Winston-Salem airline. It was all of North Carolina's debut into the big time.
When Piedmont turned a year old, the Fayetteville Observer took out a full page, maybe 2 pages, 2 full pages, of nothing but our airline. And they called it our airline because Piedmont was going to serve Fayetteville. It was on their original route structure, but they actually weren't even flying to Fayetteville yet.
When the stewardesses got their wings, it was news, and it was something Gene Martin dreamed about.
I remember when I got hired, I went out to the airfield, and I just looked up and I said, I'm a part of this now.
And as her collection of uniforms attests, she has been for 20 years. She even met her husband at Piedmont. They're both flight attendants.
It was just fun.
We did.
We felt like you felt like you were part of something. Mm-hmm. Really did.
Something great.
Yeah.
You just felt like you were part of something great. And everyone took pride in it.
For every person you see on a Piedmont jet, there are 5 people working behind the scenes.
Piedmont's commercials featured the employees because for Tom Davis, they were the airline.
A lot of people who never get off the ground help keep us the up-and-coming airline.
By the 1980s, Piedmont was flying more than 5 million passengers a year and was named Airline of the Year in 1984.
Our loads were always really full. You know, we had incredible service. Everybody was always happy, and it was just a great time to be in the airline industry.
It was also a very volatile time.
Today's merger creating the nation's 5th largest airline.
After the government deregulated the airline industry in 1978, many of the smaller companies began buying each other.
Piedmont was very measured in its approach. It listened to its own muse, it followed its own drummer, and it thrived in deregulation. It was one of only 3 airlines to make a profit every year after deregulation.
In 1987, USAir won a bidding war with Norfolk Southern Railways to acquire Piedmont. The name changed, and so did the way business was done. We're going to replace Southern hospitality with Northern efficiency, one USAir manager was heard to say.
Even though the bases in Charlotte and Greensboro and all that didn't really change, nothing really changed all that much except the colors and the paint, but you stopped hearing the word family as much anymore. Unless you were talking past tense, the old Piedmont family.
The old family still exists.
Loaded 2 passengers and 3 bags of mail. See you on the return trip.
And it still gets together. 17 years after the merger, the bulk of Piedmont's 40 top managers still meets the first Thursday of every month at a restaurant in Winston-Salem to tell stories.
We had a charter for Lady Bird Johnson out of Washington, D.C. When we got on the airplane, the Secret Service came back and said that she was a white-knuckler flyer.
And to remember what it was like to work in the family business.
The USAir merger was a bitter pill for the Piedmont employees to swallow. They were a slightly bigger airline. They clearly considered themselves a better airline. They had more efficient ways of doing things, everything from the way they serviced their airplanes to the way they ran their scheduling. But when USAir took over, they said, we're going to do it our way, and a lot of the Piedmont protocols were thrown out the window. And frankly, a lot of Piedmont employees think that USAir's current troubles can be traced to that merger and the higher expenses they incurred by doing it their way instead of the Piedmont way.
But pilots, sometimes you'll see their flight bag. They'll still have their Piedmont tag along with their USAir tag.
Those like Eric and Jean Martin, who stuck with USAirways through the merger and want to see it succeed.
You know, USAir has provided us a great life, and we just don't want to see it go down.
And go the way of the once bright flicker of lights known as the Piedmont Airlines family. If USAirways is going to continue providing a good life to its employees, it has to do something about cost. USAirways made more than $1 billion in profit in 1997. By 2001, it was losing more than $2 billion. Cut those losses to $174 million, though, last year. And it's easy to see where the problem is. USAir has the highest cost per mile flown of any airline at 11 cents per seat per mile. By contrast, the airlines that are making money these days are all below 9 cents per mile. You know, when you're flying more than 1 billion miles a year, that makes a big difference. You know, some of the old Piedmont execs are now running Continental, and that may be one reason why Continental's had some pretty good fortunes lately. The Martins have sort of hedged their bet a little bit, still hoping USAirways makes it, but they've opened a furniture store in Greensboro to kind of have some extra income to make sure.
I remember you used to ride on a Piedmont jet and you ordered like a Coca-Cola.
Right.
They would give you a full can of Coke. Piedmont was one of the first airlines ever to do that. I don't think USAirways does that.
No, and it's interesting. Our producer had mentioned to me before the story came on, that was the thing he says everyone remembered from the changeover
Full
to
can of
USAirways.
Coke,
So I don't
yes.
think that's the only reason they're in trouble.
All right, Bob, thank you.
2 races to go in the NASCAR.